Hello, this is Cognition Intelligence Section B lecture. Our prioritized standard is 8E. Objectively, we're going to analyze the role of language in cognition. So language is a communication system that involves using words and systematic rules to organize those words to transmit information between individuals. Languages can be spoken, they can be written, they can be signed. There's actually a lot of different ways you can actually use language. Now, language has a couple specific components. One of those is lexicon and another is grammar. So with lexicon, this refers to the words or vocabulary of any given language. So different languages have different lexicon. Some similar languages are going to have similar lexicon. As where grammar refers to the set of rules that are used to convey meaning through the use of the lexicon. So for instance, English grammar usually dictates that most verbs that are past tense are usually going to have an ed at the end of them. So I'm very tired. Now words are formed by combining the various phonemes that are combined to form morphemes. Now phonemes, these are the basic sound units of a given language. So like the sound of ah compared to eh. The different languages are going to have different sets of phonemes. As where morphemes are the smallest units of language that convey some type of meaning. So there's lots of noises you could possibly make, but one that actually means something is what a morpheme is probably going to mean. So like I, that happens to be something that is a phoneme and also a morpheme. Now, syntax, semantics, and pragmatics are used to construct language, which all make up a language's grammar. So syntax, this refers to the way words are organized into grammatically correct sentences. So let me give you a series of words. Happy, I. So, am, be, to, hear. So all those words mean something, but in the order they're in, they don't make grammatical sense. So potentially if I put them in the order of I am so happy to be here, that potentially is going to have the correct syntax and therefore potentially make more sense, especially when we consider the semantics, which refers to the process by which we derive meaning from morphemes and words. So when someone says, I am so happy to be here, we can usually, based on the semantics, figure out what type of message they are trying to convey by saying that. And when we talk about pragmatics, this refers to the process of deriving meaning from certain morphemes and words based on the context of a discourse. So if someone arrives very late and they're drenched wet from rain, and then they say, I am so happy to be here, potentially we can probably derive that this is a sarcastic statement, even though the words might potentially mean something different. By applying the rules of grammar to organize the lexicon, we are able to use language to communicate information about both concrete and abstract concepts. So the concrete, this refers to people or things that exist physically and that at least one of the senses can potentially detect. As we're abstract, that usually means no physical existence actually exists, refers to ideas, emotions, and concepts that you actually cannot detect with your senses, as a for instance. So this can encompass a very large range of things, topics like sharing your innermost thoughts, your plans for the future, describing surroundings of an unseen planet, debating the value of a college education, so potentially could mean a lot of things. Now, language proves to be both representative and symbolic in that it can be used to represent ideas, objects, and feelings, which means that any given statement in language can be interpreted in more than one way. The semantics of a language involve the distinguishing between the denotation and the connotation of a word. So denotation is the literal meaning of a word and refers to the actual thing or idea that it might represent. So like the term odor, this means a distinctive smell. But connotation is the emotional or psychological association a word carries with it. So when you hear the word odor, that is usually going to carry a connotation of something that does not smell pleasant. The connotation associated with a word can be positive, negative, or potentially neutral. So words with positive connotation imply positive emotions and associations. So if we're talking about smells again, but now we use the term aroma, well, aroma of food generally implies that the smell is going to be more pleasing and inviting than other words you might use. Words with a negative connotation imply negative emotions and associations. So if we're talking about the smell of food and we use the term aroma, and we instead of aroma we use the term stench, well, generally the term stench carries a less appealing connotation with it. Now, words with a neutral connotation are neither positive nor negative. So, like if you use the term dog, that's not positive nor negative. But if you use other terms like purebred, that's usually more positive. If you use the term mutt, that's usually more negative. The Sapir-Whorf hypothesis, sometimes referred to as the linguistic relativity hypothesis, states that human thinking is highly dependent on the language spoken by the individual thinker. So the hypothesis suggests that the language one uses imposes limits on both what is experienced and on how it is expressed. So there's only certain words for certain things. So if there is not a word for something, in a sense, it would suggest that you don't necessarily have the ability to mentally comprehend that concept. So the restrictions of a particular language may cause people speaking one language to perceive the world differently than those speaking another. Sapir and Whorf, they both propose that based on what language is used, this thus impacts thought. For instance, some languages have many different words meaning love that are distinguished based on what it is a love for. Yet in English, we use the word love for all types of love. So potentially one might love their significant other, one might love their children or love their parents, they might love coffee. So all of these types of love are very different types of love, uh, but nonetheless, rather we use the same term for all of those. Now, disagreeing with the Sapir-Whorf hypothesis is the cognitive universalism theory, which suggests that concepts are actually universal and thus influence the development of language. So supporters of the cognitive universalism theory point to human language as a reflection of human thought, which explains why most languages are significantly similar in their conceptual categories. Now, differences in how speakers of different languages perceive certain concepts may be more a reflection of the culture of the individual than the rules of any particular language. So different cultures are going to value different things, so based on that, they might have different words for those things. All right, that concludes Cognition and Intelligence, Section B lecture. Our prioritized standards were 8E, and objectively, now you can analyze the role of language in cognition.